Location. They burnt their kitchen down at home learning to cook. We're like 4 million in and we haven't sold a burger. We sold nearly 40% of all phones sold in the UK. The more rent we pay, the more money we make. Yeah, I mean, we'll do our site in the Champs-Elysees with 400,000 euros a week. We end up 7.5% market share in the US.
And I think they paid you £1 billion.
I think all the way around, it's about $2 billion up to us. You've got to live it. You've got to feel and be your customer.
This today is one of our retail legend interviews. When you work in the retail sector, every now and again, a new subsector appears, and it's often driven by new technologies. So, for example, the mobile phone. Later, there was broadband. When that kind of thing happens, hundreds, if not thousands of companies all go flooding into that sector. But in the UK, on both occasions, one man rose to the top of the pile. It's an absolute huge pleasure to welcome the founder of Carphone Warehouse for mobile and then TalkTalk for broadband, Charles Dunstone. Lovely to see you.
Thank you very much.
Charles, your career, as Ian said, spanned mobile phones, broadband, but also, you rolled out Five Guys, fast food chain in the UK. You've gone into a estate agency, many different kind of organic business rollouts. Is there a secret sauce or some DNA that links all of those?
I mean, they all deal directly with consumers rather than with business or being wholesalers. And so I like to try and think about how people buy something, how someone could do it better, how someone could do it with better value, and how someone could do it at scale. And I have an empathy, I think, for how a consumer thinks and behaves, and it's things that seem really obvious to me. I'm always surprised that other people sort of can't see or gets kind of in a bit of a tunnel vision. So yeah, I think that's what's behind it.
Do you keep seeing markets as sort of ripe for disruption? Because particularly with the onset of the internet and online, you kind of think everything has been done. We're in a much more kind of perfect market environment than maybe we were 30 years ago. But you keep seeing these areas where actually I could do something differently.
Yes, I mean, some of it is, Five Guys it wasn't my idea. It was someone else's business in the US, but they were doing it so much better than people in the UK and the rest of Europe. I can see how much better they're doing it than other people can see, and I kind of understand. Right, if I brought that here, it's the real thing. It's done brilliantly. It's very, very scalable. It's accessible to people.
As a layman, though, I mean, selling burgers and selling mobile phones appears to be miles apart. But as a retailer, do you see them as miles apart, or?
No, I mean, when we sold Carphone Warehouse afterwards, and really to Chris's point, you think, okay, well, all we know really is shops. I'm a shopkeeper, and what can we do now? Because aggregated retail is so challenged by the internet that it's really, really hard to see how you can make that work. But food, that's a different thing, harder to disintermediate, and indeed, the Deliveroos and people are working in association with you, not against you. So I think these days you want to be selling your own brand. You don't want to be somewhere that has a selection of other people's products within it. So we then think, okay, well, actually, food's quite interesting because we understand about property, we understand about hiring people, we understand about supply chain, we understand about pricing. So actually, it's not really that different. We're retailers. I'm not really a telecoms person.
See,
I'm a shopkeeper.
You think differently to other people because that's not obvious to other people, is it? I mean, so do you think the biggest thing in retail is finding the right location, agreeing the best commercial deals, training young people? Is that the fundamental of what it's about?
Well, you need you need an amazing proposition, whatever that may be. And then you've got to say to yourself, okay, then I have the team, I have the skills. If you sat in one of our property meetings, we know every street, every shopping centre. I have walked pretty much every street in this country. I can tell you every shopping centre. So, we'll sit in a meeting and go, we'll look at a site and everyone's saying, oh, yeah, well, that's opposite the old Debenhams and near the thing. Yeah, we like that, but the McDonald's is a bit... Everyone in my team knows the retail geography of the UK just implicitly. Then you add to that is, I think, retail businesses are really managed by ratios. So you then sit there and go, right, what do I need my cost of goods to be? What do I need my occupation costs to be? What do I need my employee costs to be? And then other general costs. And there's a great thing that I learned from the US called 55 and Stay Alive, which is that your payroll and occupation costs can't be more than 55% of your sales in the restaurant business. And the minute that you allow that to creep up,
so that's purely a restaurant KPI.
It's a restaurant KPI because restaurants generally have strong margins. They probably have like 25% cost of goods. So then you've got 25% for all your other incidentals, central office, etc.
Do other retail sectors have that kind of simplistic KPI?
I think it's difficult because everyone's going to have a different margin. If you're Sunglass Hut, your margin's going to be, I imagine, absolutely through the roof. If you're Currys, it's probably very different because you're reselling high value goods at relatively low margin.
One of the things that was different when you did Five Guys was you brought in somebody else's brand. You didn't try and build it yourself.
Yep.
What was the logic of that?
Well, we thought about it started the other way around, thinking what can work on the high street now and what can we use our skills. And what had happened in the US was you had McDonald's and Burger King. And then a thing they call the better burger segment, as people's tastes sort of got more sophisticated and their spending power increased, people wanted a better quality product and were prepared to pay for that. And, people had spotted that in the UK. So you had Byron, you had GBK. They tried to be the better burger, but in truth, if you went to the US and you went to Five Guys or you went to In-N-Out, it was just much, much better. And so you just realized...
And cheaper than a Byron, wasn't it? So
yes.
they were sort of trying to be a restaurant.
They were table service, which was, I think...
Exactly.
So you just said, yes, this is it's a really interesting segment of the market, and it'll work as well in the UK as it does in the US. And there are people that have spotted it, but they're trying to replicate it and haven't replicated it that well. So if you go to the source and bring the real thing here, then I think that will be very powerful. And in truth, it was. But the obsessiveness of it's a family business owned by the Morel family. Their obsessiveness about how everything is prepared, everything is fresh, the potatoes are chopped we chop them in the restaurant, we wash them, we double fry them, we fry them in peanut oil, which is the most expensive, hottest oil you can get. I mean, they burnt their kitchen down at home learning to cook the fries. They are obsessive about this. So if you can bring the thing where what we do is very simple, but every single aspect of it is done to the very, very best it can be done, it's extremely powerful.
What is interesting about Five Guys, so sticking on Five Guys for a minute and then we'll go back a little bit, is like a lot of the things that you've done, it's become the number one. And as you say, you mentioned Byron, for example, I think they did go bust once or twice.
Four times.
Four times.
Yeah.
So you succeeded in building that chain. I think you've got almost 300 stores around Europe, right?
Yeah.
Now, I know the market's for everything in retail and hospitality, probably not easy at the moment, but you are the sort of category killer in that better quality burger franchise. So you seem to have pulled that off multiple times, Charles. I mean, what is it that makes you different to other people who maybe got 40 stores and just couldn't make the economics work?
I think the insight I have for what customers want, they don't want table service from some miserable person, full of piercings and stuff shuffling around, which is kind of what you get in chain restaurants, is a kind of poor restaurant experience. So the queue at the counter, really, really high. Pay for the quality of the food, but not for lots of other stuff that people don't value. And then I'm probably overconfident. If I go for it, I go for it.
So let's do that bit because
But I mean, if I can just say, I mean, the real key for that, I think one of the things that really worked for us is our property strategy was super prime. First outlet in Covent Garden. We had to pay £2 million to a bar owner to sell us the lease.
Wow.
To take that site, another £2 million to fit it. So we're like 4 million in, and we haven't sold a burger. 12 million to buy a site on the Champs-Elysees to launch in Paris. I mean, we go, if we're going to do it, we're like, right, this thing is from America. It's going to land from outer space, bang, and this is a thing, and you better take notice of it because this is the new big thing in burgers.
Now, clearly, on a flagship, let's call it, that sounds almost like the way fashion people do it, isn't it? Right? I mean, clearly the payback on those individual sites must be huge. So do you then kind of average it down? Is the payback a lot quicker in the smaller towns?
So the great irony is basically it's not perfect, but it's pretty perfect. The more rent we pay, the more money we make.
Wow. Okay.
Like, you remember, what was it, Conrad Hilton? Location. We're a business. We need lots of footfall. We need to be accessible. So yeah, I mean, we'll do our site at the Champs-Elysees at €400,000 a week.
A week.
That's 2 kitchens, 12,000 square feet.
Okay, so
are you maxed out?
We can't actually. We could put
UK...
another kitchen in that one, but I can't get the extraction. So it's actually it can't. It could trade. It could actually trade more than it does.
So are you sort of maxed out in the UK market then? And from that perspective, you've got what?
200? We've got 174 or something. 177 in the UK. No, because I mean we've filled a lot of places. We've still got white space. We pioneered drive-through. So for Five Guys had not done drive-through before. So we have 5 drive-throughs. We have a pipeline of quite a lot of drive-throughs coming. We just opened in Terminal 5, Heathrow,
which would have been an expensive site, I assume.
Yeah, they just take an enormous share of your sales.
Yeah,
but it'll make money. It is making money, and it's amazing. From my point of view, I see that as a sampling exercise. Is that the number of people coming through that will discover Five Guys? It's the only burger you can buy on Terminal 5. So
let's go back to mobile, because that's where you first came to prominence, right? What did you do different to everybody else? Because there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people trying to make this work. And you became the biggest quite quick.
I think I was very, very lucky that I turned up in a market that was just growing like crazy, and the networks were making so much money that they were happy to support people like me because I was making some money and they were making a fortune out of each subscriber. So it was a very rich marketplace. It was a market share race between Cellnet, as it was in those days, and Vodafone. And it was that led to a very fast growing market is very forgiving to you. So if you make mistakes or whatever, people are happy to support you, and they won't punish you. I had one insight really, which is because I'd worked for NEC before, and Japanese company that made the phones. There was Panasonic, Motorola, and NEC, and that's who you bought a phone. That's who made your phone.
And these were big things in those days, right?
Yeah,
they
NEC
were bulky.
9A. Well, the business is called Carphone Warehouse because we were nailing them in cars to start with, and all the people that I sold to, who were then selling them to customers, were very focused on selling to large corporate organizations. So they wanted the British Gas engineer fleet. They wanted, I don't know, the Goldman Sachs. They were focused on these big major accounts. And what I saw that other people didn't, I don't really understand why they didn't, is that actually they weren't the people for whom a mobile phone was the most revolutionary thing. The thing that it really changed your life is if you were self-employed, because suddenly you could get work whilst you were at work. And I remember this memory of at home, if something needed fixing, that my parents would ring the builder or whoever, leave a message on their answer phone and hope they rang them when they got home from work to try and make an appointment. Now, you're a builder, photographer, whoever you were, you're at work, but suddenly your phone goes and you've got a job next week. That's transformational. There was nowhere for those sorts of people to buy their phone. So our thing is, right, we'll sell everything. We'll sell every network. We'll sell every handset. And in those days, coverage was very patchy. So you really had to think about, if you were a builder in Saffron Walden, Cellnet or might be much better in that area because they were built. So we'd make sure you got the coverage. We'd make sure they get the package and then the product that you needed. And luckily, the market exploded. So we ended up with 4 networks. We ended up with a plethora of people making handsets.
But are you faster at scaling up than everybody else? It feels like once you see it works, then suddenly you do hundreds of them.
But you see, I mean, I don't know. I was 25. I didn't know. I didn't know what you should do or what you shouldn't do. So there's a wonderful freedom about being young and having no experiences. You don't know what you shouldn't do. So I don't know. We just did it, and we had the supplier saying, yes, open more stores. Also, I should say, it was a very dubious industry. So there were a lot of people come into it from doing secondhand cars or all sorts of quite
double glazing, all sorts of.
There was so much sort of fraud and crime that if you had a sort of couple of young, naive but basically honest public school boys, that the suppliers, I think, thought, I think we can trust these guys, and we were probably more articulate in how we dealt with them, and so people in the end sort of preferred to do business with us, and because we did grow very fast, we delivered the sales and the market share. So
it becomes self-feeding, doesn't it?
It is.
The
I
faster you
think
grow,
it was.
the
I think
more
it
they'll
was.
help you.
Yeah.
Right.
I was trying to explain it. I remember at the time what it felt like is I remember when I was a child and running down a hill, and you get to a speed of running where you're running, but if you try to stop, you're going to fall over. And you've just got to keep going. That's what it was like. We were always relying on yesterday's infrastructure for today's business, and what we invested in for that wouldn't be enough for tomorrow. But we just kept going.
What was interesting about it, though, was that you, maybe in the space of, 10 or 12 years, there were other 25-year-olds out there who were building chains.
Yeah.
So a whole bunch of different retail chains, which have all been sold or whatever. But suddenly, by sort of 2000, when you floated on the stock market, you were much bigger than everyone else. Suddenly you're listed, you're ringing the bell on the stock exchange. Maybe you did that, maybe you didn't. And as you do when you run a business, you sometimes reach a point where you sort of look back and think, wow, how have I got here? I mean, did you sort of realize then that you had this ability to build a much bigger business than the competition, or you'd done something differently?
I don't know. My actual memory really is, I remember that absolutely profoundly, about 2 years after it started, driving somewhere and thinking, this thing might not go bust. That's the most amazing waterstone of like, oh my cornerstone, that actually this might work. And because you're just fighting so hard, hand to mouth, not paying yourself, trying to make everything work, and suddenly the phones are ringing when you're not advertising, people actually walking into the shops, and you go, wow, this actually might work. And thereafter, I don't know, we just kept on going, and then I think we floated like 2 days before the dot-com crash. So it was then pretty ugly after that. So I don't think you ever get to a point where you can sit back, put your hand on your hips and go, that's great, we've done it.
Are you good at calling the top of a market?
No, probably not.
Interesting.
I'm too enthusiastic for it.
Well, you just keep going.
I love doing it. And I love doing things where the customers love, and to get that feeling and that glow that you've done it, and you get this thing from customers saying, I absolutely love. I think but probably by the time we floated, I was like, we sold nearly 40% of all phones sold in the UK, but mobile phones were sold by Carphone Warehouse.
Wow.
I think we're Nokia's third biggest customer in the world. I mean, it was an amazing thing, but we just kept fighting. And the terrible thing, you guys, not from retail. In retail, you have this thing called like-for-like sales. That is, and you just spend your life on a hamster wheel, just running faster and faster and faster. So you can't ever relax. I was saying to someone the other day, so that's 35 years ago. There's not a single day in 35 years that I haven't woken up and almost the first thing I've done is looked at yesterday's sales figures.
That's a big lesson for a lot of people, isn't it? No matter how big you get.
Every single day I get it.
You've got more figures to look at as well.
People send too many. I just very very simple number of key figurs that you look at.
Key
that
stats.
you get.
So how many KPIs do you look at?
Daily. Daily I'll look at. It's in like TalkTalk. I'll look at gross connections and churn primarily. That's really all I need to know on a day-to-day basis. On Five Guys, I'll look at a retail business slightly different. So I'll want to know, what did we sell yesterday? What's the like for like? We have different grades of stores. What's the mix between the stores? What was it same day last year? What was it same day last week? And what was our transaction count? Because the other risk in retail is that you grow your sales by putting your prices up, but you serve fewer and fewer customers.
So the next thing you did was broadband. And
yes.
People forget, that was a market where, 2000, virtually no one had broadband. Yeah. By 2010, everyone had broadband.
Chris, you might remember, because it started actually before that, because we started selling least cost routing, which was to have carrier pre-select it was called, wasn't it? In your house, that you could make your phone calls through a different provider other than BT. So we thought we've got people in the stores. We're saying it's £25 a month and 15p a minute and da 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 da. Very easy just to say, by the way, who'd you pay your phone bill to? Would you like to save a load of money on your fixed line calls? And we're very successful at doing that. So we built that business up. We bought OneTel.
5 or 6 businesses
we rolled
probably.
up, and we ended up about 3 million probably carrier pre-select, people making their calls from home.
Was that the first time you'd done M&A?
No, we bought Tandy at Carphone Warehouse. We bought a few businesses, and we did a big business in the US with Best Buy that we sold back to them. That's another story. That was a phenomenal, I think, $2 billion up to Carphone.
So you sold your European customers? We
went 50-50 in America. We took over Best Buy's mobile business in America, and we went. They didn't make any money selling mobile phones, so we said we'd split whatever money we made over what they were making today, which wasn't anything. And we rolled it out, and we just did Carphone stuff. We didn't do anything particularly clever, but we completely reconfigured the way they sold mobile phones, and it went absolutely booming. We ended up 7.5% market share in the US with Best Buy Mobile. It became so big, then they came and bought half of the Carphone Warehouse stores in the UK, and they wanted to open Best Buy in Europe. And then eventually they wanted to buy all the mobile business back, which we did.
And I think they paid you £1 billion.
Yeah, it was I think all the way around, it's about $2 billion up to us. I think we probably UK businesses, retail businesses that have gone to America. I genuinely think we've probably made more money than anyone else has.
But looking back, because clearly you've got more things right than you've got wrong, obviously.
Yeah.
But which are the bits where you think, I wouldn't do that again?
Telecoms is a very, very tough market, as you know. I would avoid regulated businesses again in the future, because I think the problem is that the regulator wants certain things at a certain time and then wants different things at a different time. So for a while, they really, really wanted competition. So they're they're really encouraging people like TalkTalk to come in and take on BT. And then the government say, no, we want to roll out fibre. So then they need to be really nice to BT and give BT loads of money. And they don't really care about us anymore. And they wanted infrastructure competition, and ultimately they wanted BT to roll out fibre. So
I think there's a big lesson there. If you're in an industry that has quite a long payback, you need regulatory stability for a long time. Otherwise, it's a nightmare to handle.
So I think we've all been failed by the regulator. So I wouldn't do a regulated business anymore. And I'll tell you the other thing. It's not always easy to do, but one of the refreshing things about Five Guys, even versus Carphone or whatever, is there's no Apple, there's no Vodafone, there's no Ofcom. We buy some potatoes, we buy some beef, buy some buns. You come in hungry, we cook it. You give us money, we give you the food. You're happy. There's no one bullying you within it, and you're not beholden to someone else. And it's such an honest human need to have food, and it's such a human gift to feed someone else. I love the simplicity and the purity of it.
But you also went into estate agents with Purple Bricks.
Yep.
What made you do that?
Again, that was about, I think people are really badly served by estate agents. So when I bought my first flat, I had to troll around all the different estate agents, give my name and address, and then they would post me particulars of the houses. And if I didn't register with, I don't know, Winkworth or something, then I'd never know about what they were selling. And then Rightmove and Zoopla came along. So it occurs to me, estate agents only do half of what they used to do, because they don't actually market your property at all anymore. That's done by someone else, yet they still charge the same amount for doing it. So it's a market that it's corrupt, because they haven't, the efficiency that's occurred in the way that it works hasn't been passed on to consumers. So you go, and also in an online world, you don't need to go and physically see someone, and you can give customers the choice. So you might say, I don't want I'm happy to show someone around my house. I don't want to pay the fee for someone to turn up in a mini, and we've all done it. You go around the house, as they open the door, they're surprised by what room you're going into as the prospective purchaser. Whereas if you're selling your house, you can tell them about the house, you can tell how the neighbours have got planning permission to do this, that you could do, the local schools, the park, you're much better at selling your house than an estate agent is. If you want to do that, then don't pay to have it done. So it's to try and empower people. And I think a lot of what we've tried to do in business is to empower the customer to make the choices they want to have to get the thing that's right for them.
But one of the things you have done, particularly true of broadband, is you've reduced prices, which is fantastic for consumers. But if you go back to that broadband example, you came out with a famous campaign.
Yeah.
I think it was Free Broadband Forever or something,
Yeah.
which I think the Advertising Standards Authority were not too pleased
that.
about. But in driving the price down, you take the risk that you're not ultimately the beneficiary of that new pricing environment. You sort of turn a market with lots of margin into a market that's more commoditized, right?
Yeah, and we certainly did play our part in that. It's the trouble also with broadband is it's impossible really to differentiate it. So because the underlying infrastructure is really the same, whoever you take it from. I've got many regrets about what we did. Actually, the way we priced it isn't one of them, because what we should have done is price it like that and managed to keep ourselves so much more efficient than the big incumbents that they could never come and compete with us. And I think in the end, the error we made is that we began to build a cost base that was large telco rather than really nimble, fast, keeping it incredibly simple, one price. And that, the market's very difficult, but we definitely made some execution errors.
So we've got ourselves in a strange place, haven't we? Particularly where a lot of people work from home. It's the one thing you desperately need, but you're not prepared to pay for it.
No, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. We pay more for a subscription to the Times Online than you do for the broadband that you get it on.
You pay more for coffees.
Yeah. And we're all to blame. The whole industry's to blame for that.
If you're going to go into it without telling your state secrets as to what you're doing next, what's the characteristics of a market that you're looking at next to go into? Because obviously you've got the family fund looking at all sorts of things.
You need to be the brand now. You need to find something which is significantly better than what other people can get and be able to sell it to them at a fair price.
That's easy to say and hard to do.
It's very hard to do, but you think, 20 years ago, you could make a shitty chocolate bar for 20p, spend a load of money marketing, packaging, everything, sell it for £1 all day long. The democratization of information has meant that you can't get away with that anymore. The world has fundamentally changed. So more than ever, at the absolute core of what you do, it has to be demonstrably better, and it has to be good value, and you have to be very honest with people about the value that you're going to give them. I'm very intrigued by the food brands in the US, other businesses like Five Guys. Their market is
fast food,
in fast casual,
you've
whatever
looked at the chicken market, haven't you? Which seems very, very congested. If that's the right way to describe the market for chicken.
Chicken is crazy. But we've been talking to a cookie business over there, different sorts of businesses. And as a rule, when you're going to spend time with these guys over there, they're more focused, they're better at the execution and every single aspect of their business. And that's how they've taken on McDonald's or Burger King or whoever else it may have been.
What are the retailers that you admire? If you look at some of the great retail success stories, Specsavers or whatever, are there any particular ones that you sort of look at and think, God, I wish I'd spotted that niche?
Well, my favorite business of all businesses is Costco, because it's just so phenomenally honest with its customers. You pay this, you'll pay an 8% margin. You want some jeans. I can't tell you what brand, but there will always be jeans, and they'll be absolutely unbelievable value. Or you want a bottle of Petrus or whatever it may be. It's an Aladdin's cave, but it's so true to everything that it stands for and everything that you do. And I think that is the essence of what you have to have now. Not overcomplicating people, not the rush to quality. And that's a little bit, I think, what one of the errors we made in TalkTalk is we weren't the Ryanair of broadband anymore. Well, we were trying to be Ryanair, but have British Airways run it. And
you've cleared on loads and loads of things. Have you done it with a small team that's been with you forever, or have you got different teams in different businesses? How does the organisation work?
Yes, at its heart, it's a little gang of us. People have come in and
5 or 6 people, or?
Yeah, 3 or 4 probably.
And you're constantly looking at new ideas. Is there another TalkTalk scale business, do you think, to come?
I'd like to think Purple Brits can be TalkTalk scale business. It's a big thing. I was looking the other day. At any one time, we've got about 14,000 houses on our books that we're selling. But compared to any other estate agent, now that should be 50,000. But that's work in progress.
And how do you scale that from here?
Just make the machine more efficient, and there's a great expression in estate agency which I now know all about, is they could say boards get boards. So the more boards that you put out, the more people think, I'm selling they seem to be selling houses around here. So we've got places like, we have enormous market share in Liverpool. We have like 10% market share in Liverpool. It becomes a sort of virtuous circle, because everyone says, I'm going to go to there. Everyone seems to be selling that. That's where everyone's going to go. That's where the buyers are going to come to. It becomes a virtuous circle.
Do you have to spend a fortune on advertising? Because there's loads of great websites out there, but how do you get people to yours?
Yeah, it's hard. It's expensive. Single-minded about making sure, weirdly, the business of being an estate agent isn't about selling the house. It's about listing the house. So all of your focus is once you've got listings, you're going to sell it if it's going to sell. So how do you get the listing? How do you give people the best possible value to get the listing? So, if we'll be on Zoopla, we'll be on Rightmove, we'll be on Google pay-per-click, we'll be on everywhere. We have a team that do that. One of the hardest things now, one of the craziest things in business that I've seen is GDPR. So when the EU, and I read the other day, I think that across Europe, people spend 570 million hours a year clicking cookie settings on websites. By doing that, what the EU actually did, and we've done Brexit, we don't have to do it anymore. We're so stupid. We just carry on in the tunnel. It means you can't market to your customers. They've got to accept that you can, even to your own customers, that you're going to market to them. You can't store you can't have cookies, so you don't know who they are when they come back. So you have to pay Meta, you have to pay Google. It's basically they put a massive siphon into the business world of Europe and let it pump out in California. It's absolute madness. So the CPA, whether in broadband, estate agents, whatever it may be, is so high now because you've got a monopoly of dealing with two people to get access even to your own customers.
It's one of those cases where people bring in a policy and the exact opposite happens.
Yes.
But so Charles, looking back and looking forward in a sense, because our shows are really about how do you create the next £1 billion business in the UK. What do you think are the ingredients if someone was looking to start a big business and scale up? What are the ingredients, do you think?
I think it's probably a mistake to think it's going to be big to start with. I think you've got to start with a really good idea with a kind of modest launch and push, and then it's very easy to click and drag it if it works. And so, but be incredibly focused about every single aspect of how you deliver something. I always used to say to the guys in Carphone, and I think you probably noticed this when you go to most outlets, shops, restaurants, whatever, that are selling to customers, nearly all retail businesses feel like they're run from the stock room. They've opened the door of the stock room and they've looked into the shop and they're running the shop from the stock room. And what I mean by that is they're running it from the mindset of the organization of what's most efficient and what's easiest to run that store. I always used to say to them, we run our store from the pavement and we're looking in from outside, and everything we do must be, I push the door open, and what does it look like? What do I see? How am I approached? What's the signage do? How's everything going to work and look for me? So many businesses are bad at doing that. So I say to anyone, you've got to live it. You've got to feel and be your customer. And in every time I go shopping, every time I buy anything, I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking about is what's good, what's bad, is there anything I can steal that they're doing that's clever? I never ever stop thinking.
Do you ever walk in a shop and not do that, or are you just obsessed now that I just love retail? So
I love retail. I mean, a lot of it's very depressing. So you give up a bit, but you sort of sigh. But you walk into any prêt-à-manger, you're like, this is a well-run business. This is clean. The stock's there. The queues are mad. I'm sure they have their moments, but you can see. Yes, that's a really great. If I go to my co-op near the office, that's not a well-run business, and the shelves are empty, and it's a mess. Now, it's probably a war zone. It'd be a very hard thing to run. So I'm not desperately critical of them, but I spend my life saying, well, how would I stop the shoplifters? How would I do this? Why are the tills there? What could I do here? There's an amazing book. Anyone that ever wants to get into retail, there's a book by a guy called Paco Underhill called Why We Buy. And he's a psychologist who studies how people use retail outlets and what you need to do to appeal to them and how you make it work.
One last question from me. As one of the most famous retailers, do you think there's a future for the high street?
Yeah, there is, and I think you can see that happening. You can see that happening now. That's a wonderful innovation, entrepreneurial aspect, I think, of everyone, but particularly the UK character. If the space, someone will come up with an idea.
So what does this new high street look like in your mind?
I think it's got a mixture. It's got some hybrid businesses that are running online and are running a retail business. It's experiences, it's brands that are getting straight to customers. It's lots of experiences like, coffees, burgers, this type of thing. So there are, I think they say that if you lose over 25% of shops in a street, it dies. But there's not many that are at that stage yet. And there are some very deprived areas where it's hard to see how they're going to recover. But I'm surprised. I live near High Street, Kensington, which is I've always thought it's pretty miserable shopping street with tired chains in it. There's a whole rebirth going on. There's actually lots of interesting outlets,
lots of new retailers,
from
countries like Denmark, who are coming into the
yeah. So it's actually not restaurants in High Street Ken, because it's very hard to get a permit to put a restaurant on High Street Ken for some reason. So I'm optimistic about that, but I wouldn't be doing it reselling, aggregating other manufacturers' products. I think you have to be doing your own thing.
Charles, it's been absolutely fantastic chatting. We could probably go on forever. I'm sure also you're the worst nightmare for some retailers when you walk in the store and start to look at all the stuff going on.
Well, my thing is always light bulbs. I used to go, if I ever go to a shop and there's light bulbs out, that means they don't care. And that used to, if I started going out visiting Carphone stores, there would be like a light bulb panic of people on ladders trying to put them in before I got there. That's my and the door, double door with one of them locked. How unwelcoming is that?
We're all going to look for locked doors, light bulbs. Charles, it's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Ian, Charles Dunstone, another absolutely iconic founder, entrepreneur, business leader. But what was interesting about him was he's done a variety of different things, but he fundamentally describes himself as a shopkeeper. I love that phrase.
When will you find a billionaire that describes himself as a shopkeeper? It was interesting when we came into this probably thinking selling mobile phones and selling burgers is completely different. And then he had a very cogent explanation as to why that's not true. And that idea of we understand four things: property, how to hire people, and how to get pricing right. But the fourth bit is there's no point unless you have an absolutely amazing proposition. So it always comes back to you have to have a stunning product.
You've got to have a stunning product, but the other pieces are very similar, right? So one of the incredible things that Charles talked about was, I'm not sure it's absolutely true, right? But he said he's walked every high street in the UK and looked at footfall, and it's it's fundamentally about, can you get people to come into a location, and then can you make the numbers work? And so there are certain industries where it's obviously very difficult that Charles wouldn't want to go into, but he was very clear and coherent around the fundamental building blocks that get people to interact with you and buy the product.
Yeah, I think some of the surprising things about him was you think somebody that rich has probably got a team and he's now sat back, not involved. He's so retail, he still looks at his numbers every day. He has a different KPI for each type of retail. I love that story about the American one. 55 and stay alive. The idea in a restaurant, your property and your people costs can't be more than 55%. And that idea that each type of retail, whether it be white goods or sunglasses or whatever, needs separate KPIs, but really about it simple. And asking him, in your broadband business, TalkTalk, what do you look at every day? And in your restaurant, what do you look at every day? And he gives you a snap answer.
One of the things that I took away was it's almost the opposite of what you would think. Just because a location is cheap, it doesn't mean it's profitable. It's almost quite the opposite. The most profitable locations are some of the astronomically expensive locations, the Champs-Elysees in Paris or Covent Garden in London, where the footfall is so great that you can make the numbers work even with an incredibly high rental cost.
I think you only notice when I go back to our own town where we live, and there's one spot I was walking past the other day, and it's been a restaurant about 5 times. For exactly that reason, it's in the wrong location.
Charles is a guy who is 60-ish maybe, or approaching 60, not quite sure, but he is clearly never going to stop, is he? He's looking constantly for a proposition which works, which innovates, which disrupts. And I certainly wouldn't bet against him.
No, and I think one of my favourite bits was when we said, "What are you obsessed with?" And he said, "Light bulbs." And it was actually a very serious point. A store manager who will accept a light bulb not working is telling me I don't care about my store. So that whole attention to detail, retailer's detail.
Absolutely.